first-time presenter, Natalie Flamburis, and she's excited to do this. We hope to see her again another year. Maybe next year you'll have another program, or perhaps yourself, right? So Natalie will talk to us about some Wendt and Kühn.
Sounds good.
I can't quite say it like
I
you
can't
would.
say a lot of them.
So it's wooden figurines, and they've been around for quite some time, and Natalie will go through the history and the story. So, Natalie, good to have you here.
I was going to start off and before I began the presentation, and at least say that I want to apologize for my pronunciation ahead of time with the German names and locations that I'm going to be sharing with you tonight. If anybody has a correction for me, just shout it out and I'll try to change. But now I've been saying it the wrong way so long, I probably won't. Also, if you have a hard time hearing me, let me know and I'll try to fix that as well. All right. Here we go. So this is Wendt Kühn. Welcome to the world of Wendt Kühn. These little figurines that you see up on the screen were created by teams of artisans that were trained and employed by the Wendt Kühn company. And at first sight, they might just look like little tokens of sweetness that you could decorate a shelf with, or put on a display at Christmas. But don't be fooled by these delicate angels and the playful children that you see, because they represent the backbone of a company that was not only founded by women in the early 20th century, which was, not a common occurrence by any stretch of the imagination, but the company was expertly managed to survive the political upheavals in the years ahead, and they ultimately sustained multiple generations of German craftsmen and craftswomen right up to this day. In fact, 2025 is the 110th anniversary in business. So the company headquarters are in, this is one of the words, Grünheinichen, which I highlighted in blue. It's located in the Erzgebirge region of Saxony. Erzgebirge translates as or mountain, and so I highlighted that in green, but I continued it up because the mountain range actually goes all along the edge of southeast Germany and bordering into the Czech Republic. For hundreds of years, those mountains were a rich source of mining. They did silver, tin, copper, cobalt, and nickel. And they started mining there in the 12th century. By the 16th century, everything was booming and the surrounding towns were flourishing. Prosperity and prestige in the region could be seen in the architecture that was built, like large churches and grand buildings. Up here is the Annaberg altar. It was painted by Hans Hess in 1521, and a minor guild donated it to St. Anne's in Annaberg. St. Anne's happened to be one of the largest churches in Saxony. The four panels there depict the different, all of the different aspects of mining, like from sourcing the materials to building the tunnels to smelting it to transporting it and harvesting the timber they need to get all of this done. This mining industry influenced more than just the affluence of the surrounding towns. It actually permeated the entire culture of the people that lived there. And for all the financial benefits that were gained by selling these resources, actually the life of the miner and his family was not an easy one at all. It was very hard and dangerous and required that the miners were underground in dark tunnels for most, if not all of the daylight hours. And over the years, they developed stories around divine assistance that in the form of an angel with a candle that would come and assist them out of precarious situations. It wasn't uncommon in their free time for miners to carve little angel figures or figures of their family or other miners, and they would put them in their pockets when they went down to take with them. The miner became a very symbolic figure in the folk art. Representations from the 17th century forward, they depict him wearing a ceremonial outfit with a helmet. He often has tools with him, sometimes like in this one, the hammer and the pick is put on his helmet. He could be carrying them. Sometimes they carry a trumpet that they would use for coded calls down into the tunnels. But more likely than not, They have their hands out with candle holders. They hold 2 candles. And because of that, they're known as light miners. Paired with the light miners, you're always going to see a light angel who also carries a candle in each hand. That angel figure obviously evolved from the guardian angels that they carved in their pockets, but she eventually took the role of representing the miner's wife, who was considered his bright ray of hope to welcome him home each night when he got out. By tradition, families in the mining towns were said to have put miner angel figures and miner figures in their windows. They would do 1 miner for every boy in the household and 1 angel for every girl. And they would be lit at night for the miners to find their way home. And when they got home, they would be extinguished so that a dark town meant everybody was safe. So even though the ore mountains no longer are mined, the influence still continues on today. And you can see it in especially around Christmas time. During the 4 weeks of Advent, the region is full of light. It has an abundance of miner parades that are put on, special services in miners' churches, and a lot of Christmas markets. This is Siphon. It's not really known for its grand architecture, but it is known, it's probably one of the most recognizable churches, and that's because it's got an octagonal shape to it. It was definitely a miner's church inside and out. There's a lot of symbolism for that. I'm just going to show you one, which obviously was the light miner and the light angel up on the wall. And then this is a fairly contemporary miners' parade, but again, they have all the lights, the tools, and their costumes. It was in the late 17th century when the mine started drying up. I don't even know which kind it was, but it was a gradual thing. They didn't all dry up at once, but it was dwindling. And so it was making unemployment and poverty a probable outcome across the region. But the people were very adaptable, and they turned to a different resource, and that was wood. The abundance of the forest around them meant that lumber was plentiful, and in fact, they had already been sourcing it for years to build the supports in the mines and their tools that they used. Combining this with their practice of carving, it was a fairly natural shift for them into the realm of toy making. The term of toy making doesn't necessarily mean toys. They also did plates, wooden utensils, candles, boxes, but the figures were the main thing that they were known for. They did look to their community for the things that they carved, the farmers, hunters, soldiers, but of course the miner. This picture is actually an illustration for an Advent calendar, but it has the woodworker at his lathe and all kinds of things that they would have made, but there is a light angel behind him and a miner's over on the right-hand side. You can also see there's little animals, a nutcracker, and then down in the bottom left there is a candle pyramid. They also had their roots in the mining tradition as they evolved out of what was called a light rack or a light stock, which were stacked pyramid frames that they put the candles on. And they took them down into the tunnels as a means of testing the air quality, because without enough oxygen, the candles won't burn properly. A little less known kind of crafty thing that they make over there is the candle arch. The shape of the arch itself mimics the shape of the tunnel that they would enter, the archway, and they would hang lanterns along it. They often are on a platform, and they use that platform to put their little carvings and their little toy figures on. This one has some houses, miner, the little tree, and of course the octagonal church from Siphon. They mostly use lathe work and hand carving. Over time, however, they've developed their own special techniques, and there's 2 that remain unique to the area. This one is called Spambam, and it is the art of making a wood tree. And it's just a matter of taking a chisel, and they push the wood chips up, but they don't take them off, and they roll up and make the branches. Those were in the past too, decorated the candle arch and the woodman's little hut there. The second one is the art of ring carving or turning. This is a more challenging one on the lathe. You have to actually carve, the ring goes around the side of it. And then once that's formed, they carve valleys and curves into all of the edges. When they're done, they take it off and they can slice it like a loaf of bread, and you get a profile. Most times it's an animal, cows, sheep. This one's a horse. And they can either leave it as they want, or they can carve it and paint it. And the great thing about this was the ratio, the time investment for the product created. It was much easier to chunk them out and then carve them than to have like a million little blocks that you start from scratch. Woodworking traditions continued to be practiced throughout the 18th, 19th, and 20th centuries. Numerous workshops took shape. Family industries became businesses. Wendt Kühn is only one of those such enterprises, but in my opinion, it's one of the more interesting ones to explore. So the inspiration behind the company can be credited to Greta Wendt. She's on the right-hand side. She's there with her dad, Albert, and her brother, Johann. She was born in 1887 in Gruheinichen, which is, by that time it was a village well known for wholesaling folk art across the world. When she was young, she loved to draw and paint and build things, and her dad was also principal of the local vocational school where they taught craftsmanship and cultural traditions. At that time, education was for boys only, so you see Dad in there in the classroom full of boys. So the only good thing for Greta is that her dad was the teacher in the class. She could go with him sometimes, and she got to see what it was like, and she really liked it. She did have some private drawing lessons as an older teen, but she was unable to pursue any formal technical training until 1907. Germany passed a law that allowed women to attend universities and technical colleges. So within a matter of months, at 21 years of age, she was at the Royal Saxon Academy Applied Arts in Dresden. There she is. She is on the bottom left, and then next to her is her friend, Margaret Kühn. Here she was exposed to the principles of the modern reform movement, which is actually like an arts and crafts type movement, just to support the artisan traditions and to kind of push aside that industrial revolution and mechanical technology that came to mass produce. She embraced this philosophy, and she did really well in school. She graduated, went on to complete her education and an internship at a furniture design company. While she was interning there, she was asked to design a nativity scene. So this is some of her initial sketches for that scene. They're pretty linear, and they kind of look like they would come right off of a lathe carving. The company had it externally manufactured, so this is that piece, the exact piece that it was. She has all the Mary and Joseph and the baby, the shepherds, the kings, but she also added 6 angels there. They're not light angels. They don't have anything, even though their hands are outstretched. After her internship, she went back home, and she continued doing design work of her own. In 1913, she entered a competition in search of quality souvenirs, and she took 2nd place. Her entry was the berry pickers. So the little inset up top are the ones that were entered into the contest, and then the colored picture is from the company. They reissued them, I don't know, in the past 10 years. So I found a picture so you could see the colors that they had. The top placing entries in the competition were featured in a magazine article, and from that, the berry pickers received a huge response, and she got many orders. At the time that these orders were being made, she's living at home with Mom, Dad, and Johann, and they also have some craftsmen coming into the home to make the pieces. And it's starting to get busy, and it's also getting a little crowded at home. She has great confidence in her artistic abilities, and so does her dad. He's especially encouraging. He mentors her as he would one of his students, and he also gives her a little financial help. So in 1915, she invites her friend from school, Wendt Kühn, and says, why don't you move here and let's start a company together. And this is super brave for two young girls, but also because Germany's in the midst of World War I. They went ahead and they officially founded their company. The business partnership was Wendt Kühn on October 1st. And within a year, that's them, guaranteed I forgot. Within a year, they purchased a half-timbered building in the village called Angel House. It had previously housed a mail-order toy factory, and it had been empty and it was kind of demolished. The citizens in the town wanted to knock it down, but they had high hopes, and her father who knew how to build. So they fixed it up. They made the first floor all business workshops. The second floor was living quarters, and the third attic was for bedrooms. Well, her figures, the nativity and the berry pickers were what got her attention. When they first started their company, they also tested the waters for other things. They did little trinkets, they did some dollhouse furniture, they did wooden crosses. But this is a setup from a trade show they did, and they eventually started to really focus on wooden boxes and a lot of figures. The berry pickers are in there somewhere, but primarily up there are light miners and light angels. This is a light miner that she did. She's kind of starting to go off in her own direction, and this is her take on the traditional setup. So he's not quite as official in his uniform. Her angel, however, looks pretty much like the angels in the Nativity, only she has the candles this time. And then the boxes that were on there, that pretty much was Marguerite's talent. She was painting and decorating wooden boxes and chests. These were called splinter boxes. They're very similar to shaker boxes, but not quite as heavy. She turned them into art by painting them, but then in turn they marketed them as something to store your little fingers, so they were art, but they stored art. Too fast, sorry. The first floor of Angel House, this is where all of this was being done, and it was set up as what's called a manufactory, which is meaning that it's a production house staffed by craftspeople of all different fields, and they all work together to create one product. It kind of replaced medieval craftsmen, and in most cases it was short-lived and morphed into industrial factories, but not with Wendt Kühn. Over the years, multiple buildings were added onto the property as they expanded, and even with that, they still kept that philosophy of the manufacturing going right up till today. What didn't last that long was Wendt Kühn. She fell in love and she wanted to get married. Trouble was, at that time, law stated that when you got married, all of your property went to your husband. She was well aware of this and decided to sign her portion over to Greta. Before she got married, she was sure that the company remained with at least one of its founding members. By 1920, she's gone, off and married, and Greta brings her brother Johann on and has him become the new co-owner. He does all the business stuff, she does all the designing, and it's working pretty well for them. They have a good staff of craftsmen, and they're to the point where they're ready to have interns come in. So she reaches out to one of her old professors and says, can you keep an eye out for any well-suited candidates to come to our company? And that's where Lyceum comes on the scene. She had also gone to the same school, the Royal Saxon Academy, but she was in the field of textile and fashion. And even though the product focus wasn't her intended field, she was deemed a good fit for it because she was, the decorative painting and everything is very similar to textile design. So off she went and she fell in love. She fell in love with the company. And years later, she wrote in a letter that this young enterprise captivated me so completely that it became my fate. As if that wasn't enough to fall in love with your work, she also fell in love with Johann. They got married in 1930 and soon after had twins, a boy and a girl named Hans and Sigrid. When she first started there, on her internship. She was directed to paint the splinter boxes and to paint figures that Greta had designed. These were the Lippendorf angels. These are more traditional ones. These were also Greta's design, but they pretty much looked just like all the other ones that they had in the area. Ollie, however, brought a richness to the decoration and a depth to the painting that she carried through her work the whole time she was there. She also expanded beyond this to start doing designs for her own creations and became co-designer with Greta. These two women alone are responsible for more than 2,500 original designs that were crafted, all based on their patterns. Arguably, the most important year for the company in the area of design was 1923, primarily because of these three little figures. They were called the Angel Musicians, and Greta made them as Christmas gifts for employees. So we've seen the wings before. These are much tinier than the other angels. We've seen these before. But this is the first time that she decorated the wings with dots, not stars, and she had a consistent number on them. These were done with, it's like a dowel. It's not a toothpick, but it was like a dowel that they had carved to a certain size, and they would dip it in the paint and do 4 consecutive dots, so each dot gets smaller as it goes up. So they did 2 rows of that and then a third along the edge. Greta claimed there was no rhyme or reason to the choice of 11 dots, and is quoted as saying they just turned out like that. They did have a book come out in 2015, How the Angel Gets Its 11 Dots. It gives some explanation to the story, but it's a contemporary creation, and it's not of Greta's imagining at all. It's kind of cute, though. The storyline details an assortment of 11 virtuous acts that an angel must perform, and they get 1 dot for everyone that they do. It's not until they get all 11 dots that they are allowed to pick up their instrument. These first 3 little angel musicians went on to become an entire orchestra. And then from there, they continued on to pick up a wide assortment of accoutrements. Now, they still are called angel musicians, but they actually fall under a more generalized category. That's the 11-dot angels. Where creative ground was really broken with these little things is not with their name or with the decoration of the wings. It's with their design. So if we look back to what Greta had done before, they're very along the lines of the traditional woodworking that had been done. They're very stiff, symmetrical, all due to the restrictions of the lathe. And limb attachments were limited to flat silhouettes. I have a sample. So if they had an arm and they wanted to attach it, they cut it out of a flat piece of wood and they glued it to the side. If they wanted it bent, that's how they cut it. They did have some dowels on the berry picker, but they came straight down. The angel from the Nativity does have bent arms, and I think that must have stuck in Greta's mind, because she takes that and she goes with it. So she takes the dowel and she cuts it at a 90-degree angle. If you put it together, then you have that same angle you could cut out of a flat piece of wood, but now it's 3-dimensional. And because you have a lot of angles you can play with, you can make a lot of different movements. So this can be done for the elbows, the shoulders, the ankles, the knees, and even where the thighs come up to like the robe or the dress. So you can see here, she's added to the collection here. And when she's doing this, now there's a lot of motion to the scene. They're sitting, they're kneeling, one is praying, they're stepping forward, and one is even flying up top. So with this development, Greta has merged her personal creativity and artistry with the Erzgebirge traditional woodworking practices, and Wendt Kühn is full steam ahead. So the manufacturing is busy, and this is how it works. It's divided up into 4 shops. Each one performs an essential step in the production process that takes logs and turns them into hundreds of thousands of figures every year. The company does source their wood from a supplier, but it's a very close working relationship. This is Johan inspecting a log. They're very strict in what they want and how they want it processed. Usually it's milled into square, flat, or round profiles. And once it's delivered to the company, it's stored. This was their original timber storage, was outside. In the 40s, they covered it up to protect it from the elements, and now they have a full warehouse. But it's stored there for 2 years at least, and they stack it so that it has the most circulation of air around it so it dries properly. They primarily use 4 types of wood. They use lime, beech, maple, and spruce. The first 3, lime, beech, and maple, they're very uniform in color and they don't have a lot of grain, so they work really well with making the little figures. Some is softer and works well for arms and legs and instruments, and some is harder, which is good for torsos and the head. It's very sturdy and it's good to paint on. The spruce, they only use in music boxes. It's a heavy grain, but it does well with, I don't understand how music works, but it works well with that wood. Once it's dry enough, they process it more at Wendt Kühn to make it into smaller and smaller shapes that they're going to use to make all the little figures. They do have some technical areas in the company. It was mostly Greta's father that had this philosophy. They were willing to use power in order to improve not the productivity and make more things, but to make things in a better way and to also improve the work conditions of the employees, because that was their greatest asset. After training them all those years, they wanted to make sure they were healthy and they were happy. So this is one of the wood workshops, and it's just through the years, the 20s on the left, and it was a single motor powered all the lathes. By the 60s, they were each powered on their own. And then down, I think that's like 2010 or so, they have what was called a chip extraction system set up, and those are those big tubes. And it actually takes all of the wood pieces that fly all over, and instead of having to breathe it all day and sweep it up at night, it takes it up and takes it to the furnace, and it pretty much heats the entire, all the buildings by doing that. Now, even with having automated machines in the shop, the human being is irreplaceable. This is an example of why. This is a tumbler. They haven't changed much in about 100 years. It's where you take all the little wood bits that they've cut them down, and they put them in there to spin and to rub them smooth. But to do so, you need to know what kind of wood it is, what the shape is, how much is going in there, to determine what the rotation speed should be, how long it should be in there, and what kind of abrasives like sandpaper stuff need to go in. If you're off, you could just end up opening it and it's just all little nubs, not anything. So it's very closely monitored, and they too have to be trained for years before they're allowed to do this on their own. So these are the steps. When it leaves the wood shop, on the far left, that's what's going to be coming into the next stage. They used to be transported in little baskets. I think now they have plastic bins because it's easier to stack them and stuff. Let's skip a page. So the next stop is the gluing shop. It's meticulous here, so even though they look like they're kind of cut perfect, there's still some shavings that need to be done in parts so they fit them exactly to the body. Everyone is tested before they're glued. They're glued by hand, and they're set out to dry for several days without being touched. One thing that they do glue on that's interesting are the little hair curls on the angels on the side. Those come from a turned ring. So they actually slice those at their workstation and then glue them on there. Early on, it wasn't a very friendly space to work in. Oh, it might have been friendly, but it wasn't comfortable. The lighting was poor. The seats were uncomfortable. They're kind of cramped. And the worst of it was they used a bone glue that came in little beads that they had to dissolve in hot water, and the smell was horrible. So luckily that's been upgraded. They now use a cold glue, and they have ventilation. system installed. Next up is the dipping shop. It's hard to see on that top one, but when they come in there, they stick a little wire dowel in the bottom, and they turn them upside down into a can of primer, and they foam and they swirl them so that all of the excess comes off, so it has a really smooth, even covering on the top. When they're done with that, they set them upright, and it takes them 10 days before they're hard enough to move on to the next. But I stop and talk about moving them. So when they added onto Angel House, the back of Angel House went down a hill. So they built all the other workshops going down. So all of these things are going up and down the hill. Once they're glued, you can't just toss them into a basket and carry them, and they're going to break. So they needed to come up with a system that would keep them safe. So someone designed what's called the tray transport, and it's basically a box. You could put up to 8 trays on it if there were small ones, but it gave leeway if you had a tall one. And then you strapped it to your back, and that way when you're going up or down the hill, you could adjust your position so that the figures all stayed level and nobody fell and fell down. The gentleman in the picture is most likely Kirk Klug, who was their first, what did they call him? The figure carrier. That's what it is. And they still have one today. His name is Mario Stein. They did dally with putting in a trolley system, but they never even got to it because they would have had to secure all of the little figures, and that was going to take far longer than to just put it in this thing and walk it up the hill. So it goes to show some traditional practices have proved their worth through the years. So he's taking them, they go to the paint shop. They use over 400 different colors. Each one is hand mixed from only 5. They use a chrome yellow, ultramarine blue, blue-green, carmine red, and bright red. Black and white can be added, but with very limited additions, and they have to be very careful with it. The paint is a spirit-based copal resin paint. It's difficult to work with. It takes a super long time to dry, but it gives an intense shine to the figures. There's only one supplier in Germany that makes it. They've worked with them for years. The paint recipe is a secret, but then so is the recipe for the paint colors at Wendt Kühn. So they're a good team. So they're mixed in small batches, all of these colors. There's no recipes and there's no computer aid. It has to just be learned from experience, and that's by doing it. There's 3 master craftsmen who have the training and the authority to mix. It takes years to achieve. The process goes like you mix it, you paint it on a piece of wood, you let it dry overnight or 2 days so you see what the color is when it's dry. If it's not appropriate, you might add even just 1 drop of a color. You paint something, you let it dry for a day or 2, and then you look at it. It can take a couple weeks to get the color just right. But once it is, we put it in little jars, and it's stored in what's called the corridor of drawers. The organization is really precise. It's not just shelves where there's a bunch of jars and you go and pick what color you need for your painting job that day. It's a system that stores paint by each figure design. So 1 box per figure, and in that box are all of the colors. So all of those colors on the table there would go in the box that was to make those little, whatever that particular 11 dot angel is on the tray. No color one color can ever substitute for another. So if you're out of forget-me-not blue, don't think of reaching for, say, ice blue or rainy skies blue. You can't do that. It's not allowed. And the color names, they all have nature themes. That's to be expected because nature was Greta's big inspiration, and she looked to nature for the colors that she used. It was really important for her to have gardens and paths adjacent to the workshops. She wanted her employees to be able to eat lunch, take a walk out there, just simply get a breath from work throughout the day. This is an early workshop. It's not quite the earliest. They first started with 5 painters. This one has 10. Again, it's kind of like the gluing shop. They're painting with lights that are hung from the ceiling, so it couldn't have been very, very easy to work there. It's very crowded. Today, by comparison, out of the 160 employees they have in the company, only, 80 of them are painters, so like half of the employees are painters. And they are the only shop to have 2 workshop spaces in order to have enough room for them to get everything done. Painting the figures in the shop is done in steps, and because the paint takes so long to dry, you do one thing and then it has to dry and then you do the next. This is the most consuming time of the process, but when you watch them actually paint, it's amazing how quick they do it. They're so talented that they can paint them quickly. It's just the drying process that takes a long time. Last step is the little faces. Out of the 80 painters, there are only 4 that do faces. That's all they do all day long, are faces. That's their job. Within each of the 4 shops, craftsmanship skills are passed from one generation to another. There's not a school that you go to. You go there and you learn from the people who are working there. For applicants, they look for somebody with fine motor skills, attention to detail, artistic talent, patience, and a willingness to put in the years of practice you need to. It can take 3 years or more for the completion of an apprenticeship, and they always try to have at least 11 trainees on site working for that so that they have replacements when people leave, or they have a shop that has a greater need for employees in it. Successful completion of an apprenticeship is a win-win for both the employee and the company. The employee is in guaranteed secure employment, and it's not penny work. They pay them well because they've put in the training for them. They want them to stay there. The company gets out of it that they know that their tradition and their history and how they make these things is going to go on for another generation to come. Very last thing is to put the label on. This whole process from leaving the wood shop to getting the label could be 6 to 8 weeks to complete. The logo itself is a spruce tree with their initials W and K. Sometimes it will have Grünheinischen on the bottom. At first it was a stamp that they put on, but by 1930 they had a paper label. There were a few other changes to logos as time went on, but we need to look at history a little bit to see why they changed. This goes through the 40s. 1940 was their 25th anniversary in business, but it was also in the midst of World War II at this point. Johans was somehow able to prevent the workshop from being taken over to armament production, but they were no longer allowed to make the figures for a while. They had to make vehicle models for officer training. It was kind of lucky for them, but the family was not so lucky. At the end of the war, this area in Erzgebirge was forced to become part of the Democratic Republic, the German Democratic Republic, and by the fall of 1945, Johans was deported to the Soviet Union and imprisoned in a camp. Ollie was fearing for her children. She made arrangements for Hans, who was 15, to be taken in as a refugee at a master woodturner east of Munich, so out of there. And then a few months later, she sent Sigrid as well. Hans trains there, he goes to school there, he gets his degree, doesn't come home for 9 years. But when he does, he goes to work in the company as a production engineer. And then eventually, Greta has him sign on as co-owner because his dad never comes home. Ollie always held out hope for years, but it wasn't until 1962 that she found out that he actually died in 45 in that Russian camp, so he didn't make it very long. The manufacturer went back to producing their own products at the end of the war, and Ollie just really dove in. That was what she focused on. It was her distraction, it was her comfort, and she dedicated herself to the service of the company from that point on. Their quality retained itself. They won an award for the Quality Mark of Arts and Crafts, and they were able to add it to their label. It's a lily and a hammer, and it just is the purity of hard work and craftsmanship. The bottom one has a little green dot on it. That was like a little blip in time. They had trouble with the wings coming off, the wooden wings breaking. They tried using plastic ones for a while. That didn't work either. But when they used a plastic wing, they put the dot on the bottom to acknowledge that it wasn't totally an all-wood figure. 1972, Wendt Kühn was forcibly nationalized. The family was made to feel as if they were guests in their own workshop. And Ollie became an employee of the state. Hans was appointed work director, and they were no longer in charge of their own distribution. The one good thing is they were forced to change their name to Werkkunst, which meant publicly owned work art. But luckily for them, the Werkkunst was a W and a K. So this is the label that they had under nationalization to start with, and it just took the and out from between the W and K. And it does say made in East and Germany East, but it's pretty close. Hans, being the business guy now, he did a great job navigating the bureaucracies and trying to source materials. It became very difficult to get what they needed, and they did the best they could. They did keep their quality because their craftsmanship was ingrained, so that didn't go. A lot of companies were losing their identity at this time, and so they founded, what did they call it, a trademark associations, and you were allowed to join that. Wendt Kühn joined one that was the Association for Arts and Crafts, and their symbol for that, or their trademark, was the Erzgebirge, and it basically meant this was not a factory. This was made by people by hand. That's the best they could do. It's very, very generic. Other than that, these are two little sewing girls that I have. The one on the right was given to me by a friend, and the one on the left, the blue one, I found at a thrift shop. On the bottom, the new one obviously has their label back, but the one on the left was made during this time. And, I always wondered, because they're so strict with their color, everything has to follow the design, why they were different colors. And I did have somebody suggest to me fairly recently that it could have been a supply shortage, although they're the same colors. I don't know, it just happened. It was a difficult time for them, but I love having the two that are different when they're not supposed to be. 1990, the company's able to privatize again. We go back to these labels. Eventually they add fine German craftsmanship on the bottom. This is Greta outside taking a walk. She worked until 1972, so she didn't work once it was nationalized. She died 5 years later. She lived there her whole life, but she did see the world. She did a lot of trade fairs and world fairs. She had a lot of obstacles throughout the time, but she stayed grounded in her company, and she was free in her creativity. She's quoted as saying, "Only when you do something with love, it will return to you." And Ollie continually worked until 1983. She was an employee there for 63 years. And she said, "I am grateful and happy I can still do it. After all, work is a blessing." She died in 1991. So she did get to see them become a private company again. These two women shared a great respect for each other and enjoyed a healthy creative competition. Their dedication, hard work, and creative thinking lives on today in the company they fostered all their lives. It's in the 110th year, and it's currently being run by third-generation family members. They're children of Hans, so it's Greta's great niece and nephew, and Ollie's grandchildren that are running it today. All of the original drawings, patterns, and wood samples are carefully archived and still referred to. The abundance of documentation they have in hand is amazing, but when you consider they made the 2,500 designs, not so much. Speaking of original designs, there they are, out on the snowball fight. Greta and Ollie's creativity and imagination did inspire a fair share of imitators, to which they just responded it was Greta that would say, "Okay, then let's just come up with something new." They didn't get upset, they just knew they could do something different. So we're going to take a quick peek at the things that each one was known for. Obviously Greta, we already talked about the 11-dot angels, but I'll show you, this is Angel Mountain, and there is how they became the orchestra. This is on a platform, a stepped up platform that they constructed, and at the top is the Madonna. This went with Greta to the 1937 World Exhibition in Paris and won a gold medal. And this was a big moment for them because it brought world recognition to their company by doing it. So these little things were very popular after that. I'd also mentioned how they branched out beyond the instruments. So here's a little one down on the knee with flowers and a little letter delivering, a lot of motion still. This one's more of a souvenir based, a shout out to the heritage of the area, the mining angel. This one's my favorite. An angel with a toy village. So this celebrates the toy making traditions, soup to nuts. It's we have the little house for the cottage industry, the house for the timber, the tree for the timber, and then the little horse there, which obviously is the ring turned technology that they came up with. And on top of, underneath it is the splinter box that when she's done playing with her toys, she can put it inside. This was a different line Greta did. This is the Blossom Kinder and Friends. This little girl's holding a marguerite, which is like a daisy type flower. It was a favorite flower of both hers and Ollie's. That had been the first one she made. 18 more followed pretty quick, and they're just really cute. They have a joyful feel to them and very childlike. Really fun for Greta because she loved nature so much. They did expand it in 2007. They've made a lot more, but they don't just make up their own. They go back to the drawing. So there are ones that Greta drew but wasn't able to have produced for one reason or another. Their friends are basically the same kind of a little figure, but they don't carry the flowers. They carry a wide variety of items, and they're very marketable to sell out for holidays and stuff. They do everything. They do cooking, sewing, playing. This is one of mine. She's got a little doll she's taking for a ride in her wagon. Holiday themes and seasonal themes. This is called Spring Boy and Girl. A little bit different. These are some gnomes, line of gnomes that Greta did. They're big in Germany. They have, I guess they're common to their story lore. They're helpful, handy helpers that come at night and do your household tasks. So we're cutting fabric and polishing a boot and washing the floors there. And then her favorite, I think, to do were music boxes. She considered them magical and that they were a trinity of motif, melody, and movement. So she liked to really create a whole theme to it. The one on the left is called Children's Procession, and that's probably the most famous of all of hers. She has a lot. The tree is similar in process to the tree that we saw, where they roll the branches, but this one, when they do that, they let the lathe spin, and it just makes it kind of crazy. You can see videos of them doing it. It's fun. All right, Ollie. So Ollie made some little angels too. These are called marguerites. That was her favorite flower as well. The first three that she made are on the front row. One has a cake, the next has flowers and a little envelope. And then like the light angel, the third one has 2 candles. They're called the well-wishers. And again, there were lots of drawings. They did make more than that, but there were lots of drawings that they've expanded on since 2007. Most of them are less than 2 inches tall. They're always dressed in a white dress, blonde hair, wings with a blue decoration on them, and the ring of marguerite flowers, which is what they're named for. I'm a little confused how that's made. I've read 2 different things that that's a ring-turned process as well, and I've also heard it was stamped cardboard, which I don't think, because they label them as all wood, so it probably is a ring-turned thing, very thin, that they wrap around and they glue it. Being that it's they were started in 2025, so this is their 100th year birthday. This is a special one they put out for this year to honor that. And these 3 are little Christmas ones. On the right has a tree topper, on the middle has ornaments, and then on the left, I was confused what that one has, but it is a Christmas tradition. That's a prune doll. The history behind a prune doll is that in the 18th century, they used orphan children. They were dressed in black, and they would send them up into the chimneys to clean them from the inside out. They're supposedly good luck. I don't know how that comes about. And they sell them at the Christmas markets every year as good luck tokens. And they are made of literal prunes on dowels. And sometimes their faces are walnuts or a fig. They usually have a cardboard hat and a wood ladder with them. These are brocade angels that Ollie made as a reunion gift for her husband. And she, it was in 1945 she made those. They put them in their inventory. They made them to sell. It also expanded into taller ones. She really decorated them a lot, very ornamental. In the village that they live, the church there uses them on the altar at Christmas to hold up a candle arch every year. The unique thing about these is her painting technique. It's a glazing, so it's a transparent paint, and she uses at least 7 layers to do it. It gives it a very feathery look and a lot of depth to it. This is all her thing, and she had everybody step back. She was the one that painted all of these. They didn't go to the workshop, just her. She did design some animal figures, and she used the same painting technique, which worked really good with the little animals. The penguin's really cute. There's 2 penguins in that their heads will turn so you can move them, and they look like they're looking at you and stuff. Her husband was not the only person to inspire her. After the birth of her twins, she did numerous designs for either twins or pairs of children together. This one was specifically in honor of her twins, but this is one, just a pair of children. They had her design. It had never been made until fairly recently. For a collector of these little figures, they do age over the years, and they are delicate, so breakage is an issue. Also is chipping and fading. This is one of mine. I found her at the Hollis flea market in a box of tools for $5, and I was so happy. The company, though, to accommodate these trials of life, they offer a restoration service. It's set up as an aside to the manufacturing and the repairs department, and it performs it's just on their own. The craftsmen that work there, they do everything. They cut, they paste, they prime, and they also mix paint. And that's because the philosophy is they will not restore a figure to good as new, but they'll restore it to reflect the history of the years that it's endured. So this is an example that they have redone. I just wish there was an original so I could see how the paint faded, but they fixed the bench bottom. She didn't have a face, it was all worn off, and her dress was very chipped. There's 4 craftsmen in the company that do this. They get, I think, 4,000 sent in every year to be restored. Yeah, it's very popular. It's the company's hope, my sticky, so I don't forget to turn the slide. It's the company's hope that by offering this repair service, it will encourage the preservation of the work already made as opposed to people just going out and buying something to replace it. It's just one example of their sustainability practices. The lumber sourcing is all local, and they use native woods, so it's less emissions. They're very careful with their wood. They use every bit of it down to the shavings, which we talked about, then fuel the heating system. Packaging is all wrapped in biodegradable and recyclable materials. And preserving the natural environment. So Greta was very careful in the layout of the buildings that she wanted to leave as much open space as possible. This was called the Green Grove. And recently they've started at the company letting the grasses grow longer and the wildflowers come in and not trying to landscape it, just to let it be. All right, so figures out in the wild. So Sweden, the Swedish royal family is a loyal customer and has been for years. They own one of these music boxes along with probably every other one that she's ever made, and they decorate the palace with it every Christmas. Her Majesty Queen Silva of Sweden, she founded a World's Childhood Foundation for the purpose of strengthening children's rights, and Wendt Kühn recently partnered with them, creating an 11-dot angel that the proceeds would go to this foundation. Because they felt so strongly for it, they changed the dots on the wings to be multicolored, which is part of the symbol of the foundation. It was kind of tricky, it was very time consuming, because instead of like one dip with 4 consecutive things, they had to have actually 11 different dowels, one for each color and with a different diameter to get the little dots different sizes. But they thought it was worth it, so they did. All right, next up is Hollywood. They got there through Walt Disney, who was a collector of a wide assortment of curios that caught his eye. It's thought that he picked up his first Wendt Kühn on a trip to Germany. He collected a few of them. And the fact that they tickled him is not surprising, because they're just joyful and childlike in nature, and so aligned with his desire to make people happy, especially kids. These are some of his, behind him, they're up on the shelf behind him. It's hard to see, but that's where he kept them. These are some of them up close. Knowing that he loved these little figures, his wife purchased one for his daughter Diane to give him on the first Christmas after she was born, and that stayed a tradition for years. And come 2009, Walt Disney Family Museum opened in San Francisco, and Diane was a big part of that, and she was sure to make arrangements to have the Wendt Kühn figures sold in their gift shop, because she wanted guests to have the opportunity to get them just like her father did. And not only did they captivate a movie maker, but they found their way into a movie. When Saving Mr. Banks was under production, the team sent Wendt Kühn pictures of Walt Disney's office and asked if they could possibly find figures that were close to what he had, and they actually were able to match them identically. And so they're all on the shelf behind him there. And just like Disney attended to the fairy tales, Wendt Kühn had their little stints of doing it. This is their Cinderella, and this is their little Red Riding Hood. So cute. All right, next up is New Hampshire. All right, this is, I don't know if anybody's seen this book, Prayer for a Child. It was written in 1941. It won the Caldecott Medal for illustrations. It was illustrated by Elizabeth Orton Jones. So the book itself is like a little poem of blessings about all the comforts in a child's life. The first one is, bless this milk, bless this bread, bless this soft and waiting bed. And each 2-page spread has a line of the poem and then an illustration facing it. And on the bottom left there, each line of the poem starts with a big letter, and there's little angels that are very, they're the Marguerites. I couldn't think of the name. They're down there, it's hard to see, but there they are. This is my favorite page in there. You can see them all assembled on the back. And there's my Hollis find, and I have another one that's not quite as bad, but I think the Hollis one looks like she had more fun. So why is this from New Hampshire? It's because Elizabeth Orton Jones, she lived in Mason, New Hampshire. She also illustrated another book, the Little Red Riding Hood Golden Edition. And she used a neighbor's cottage as her inspiration for Grandma's cottage in here. And if you've ever eaten at Piccadilly Place, you've been inside of Grandma's cottage. Back to this one. Elizabeth Orton Jones was the illustrator, but the author of the book was Rachel Field, and she wrote another book called Hitty's, Her First 100 Years. It came about, she and her friend Dorothy had gone to lunch, and then after lunch they went window shopping, and they saw this little wooden doll in the window of an antique shop, about 6 inches tall, and they both fell in love. She was very expensive. Finally worked out if they pooled their money together, they could buy her. So they bought her, and they shared her between each other. And just so happened that Rachel was an author, and she decided she would write a story about her, and Dorothy was an illustrator, so she decided she'd illustrate it. The story itself kind of follows this doll for 100 years, and it takes you through the history of America following this doll. At the time, it won the Newbery Award, and it was very popular. It's somewhat dated now, but it's still very popular with grown women who buy carved dolls or carve them themselves. They outfit them, they get them doll houses, and they travel with them. And their common practice when they're traveling is to take their doll and set it up at some place that's recognizable, take a picture, and then they share it online, post the pictures with all their friends. And it just so happens that Wendt Kühn decided that they would make a Globetrotter angel, recent edition, another 11 dot, and part of their marketing for it was take your Globetrotter on travel, take your pictures and send them to us, and we'll post it on our online channels, which they do. They're trying to get a picture from everywhere up there. Now, for those of you that travel on your own, should you ever end up in Germany, you can visit the company headquarters in Grünheinichen. That's Angel House right there. They've added what's called the World of Wendt Kühn. It's kind of like a museum of sorts, and they have themed displays, like this year it's probably in order of the Marguerite's 100th year. They also have an interactive area where you can follow the progress of the manufacturing. You can even kind of try things out yourself. The biggest attraction is this. It's the Grand Sample Cabinet. It was made by Greta's father originally, and now it houses all of the wooden samples of items that are not in production. Everything that's in production is out of there. They take things in and out of production all the time. When it goes out, it goes into the cupboard, and it has to stay there for a minimum of 5 years. Some have been in there for 60 years. It's just a random whatever they feel like pulling out, but people like to go and see what's in there. They also offer open houses. Every so often you can actually walk through the workshops, and they have garden tours. One of them is called the Blossom Kinder Trail, and you get to experience it just like Greta did. You could also go to Siphon, where they have a store with a kind of a museum. They also have some very large music boxes in there. If you just want to do some, what, I missed one. Skipping one, I don't know. We have this, I'll do it here. If you don't want to travel, you can sign up to get the 11 dot post. It's free. They send it once a year. There's a German version and the American version. And it has stories about the figures. This is the little Globetrotter. At the beginning, it will tell you what's coming new, and then it tells you what is going into the cabinet. So, and you always get a postcard in it. It's fun. They also come with a list of dealers, which you can also get. This is their website. I highlighted up on the top is where you can click and sign up to get this every year. And you can also go and find their dealer list. Wendt Kühn does not do mail order at all. You can buy at one of those 2 locations, and that's it. Everything else is you have to outsource. They do work with people that they ship to. You can get them on Amazon. I've found them, thrift stores, antique stores. I haven't bought many new ones, so I don't really look there, but I did go a lot. My favorite shop to go to was Alphabet Soup, which you might recognize from the Oval. She carried them, and she had a little cabinet for them. So that was the only one I ever saw in person. And now, if you're interested in having a look at them, feel free to come up and poke around. The items in the middle cabinet are all Wendt Kühn. The ones on the right-hand side are all from Germany, but different companies. And the ones on the left are from either Sweden or Italy. I don't really know any about any of them, but I just like to compare and see what the differences are. Please feel free to pick them up. It's fun to see how they feel in your hand and to turn them around and see what they look like. If something were to happen to them, it's not a big deal. No worries. It's nothing more than a little bit of excitement in their lives, and they deserve to have the same adventure that Kitty had in her first 100 years. Other than that, we have some German-inspired food to eat. And I hope you enjoy it.
Wow.
So before we let Natalie go, I'm sure you have some questions. And I'm going to turn on the little spotlights here just to illuminate the work. So I'm interested in how you started this and how many pieces do you own?
That's it.
Oh, that's it.
That's it. That's it. I don't go looking for them. I have one friend that will send me some as a special treat. And my mom has given me some. And then the other, I just let them find me. So the first one the first one was a sewing girl. And it was because I like to sew. And it was at a consignment shop. And I debated, like, oh, do I really need to spend my money on that? And I did. And I'm glad I did.
How expensive are they?
Thrift stores and stuff, I've gotten them for between $5 and $15. If you buy them brand new, you're going to start probably around $50 to, depending on how elaborate. I mean, like the Little Red Riding Hood, it's going to be about $400.
No,
Yeah.
for one figure, 400?
Well, I think for the set, the Wolf and Little Red Riding Hood, yeah. And the music boxes are like 1,000. That's why the royal family has them.
Wow.
Have you been there
No,
to the Germany, the company? No.
no, I just, maybe someday.
Yeah, you're gonna go.
The figures look like the figures in the Disney World exhibit, It's a Small World.
Yes, don't they?
Yeah.
I wonder if he was influenced. I don't know what the difference in the time, like when he first saw them, if it was an influence. Yeah.
Any other questions? If not, let's give her another round of applause. So before we pull the chairs up and have some refreshments and food, please take a few minutes to take a look here. Next month, we'll have a program on Alexander Graham Bell. And we'll, as you know, he invented the telephone, but he had a lot of other technologies that he worked on. His family was involved in hearing and sight and reading, and he also worked with Helen Keller, which you may not have known. So stay tuned. Yes.